Good afternoon, good morning. Again, thank you for joining us. I think it's time we get started. As we evaluate topics to share on these webinars, we really put in some effort to figure out what would be most useful to you. And this time we've kind of have a dual topic focus. And there are certainly, they work well together. They're both default tools within SQL Server, although we find that often they go unused. Now, before I steal any more thunder from Rich, one of our senior consultants here at SSG, I'll turn it over to him and he'll get underway. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, welcome to the webinar, everybody. I won't stand on too much circumstance. Let's just jump right in. Quick bit about us. We're SQL Solutions Group. We're a full stack SQL Server consultancy. If you need any help, we offer ad hoc and remote DBA work. Get in touch. Right, today's session is about extended events and query store. Now, part of what we do is we run health checks. We see a lot of new environments, more than most people would see, just by the nature of what we do as consultants. And one thing that users or one thing that customers aren't usually great at is extended events and query store. We'll talk about both of them and why they're useful, why they're not used so much, and the opportunities for using of each of the environments, each of the features. So, why extended events and query store? So they're really powerful if you know what you're doing and that they exist and how to use them. They're both ultimately diagnostic data. They do very different things, but it's just data for you as a DBA, so that you can make informed decisions on what's going on in your environment. They're both modern tools. Extended Event is the more modern replacement of SQL Server Profiler, effectively, especially the XE Profiler section of it. And Query Store is a 2016 plus feature, and it's very active on Microsoft's roadmap for enhancements. It's all part of their active query tuning, the AI part of the tool in Azure. And they're very powerful tools, and every modern DBA should at least know what they are and what they can do, so that they can take advantage of them. Right, Query Store. Let's start with Query Store. Like I mentioned, this is a SQL Server 2016 plus feature, which is the oldest version of supported SQL Server right now. So I hope you're on it. If not, I hope you're thinking about a migration up to a more modern version. It's set at a database level, this feature. It's not a server-wide feature. It's specific to databases. It is not enabled by default unless you're creating a new database on a 2022 plus instance. So Microsoft decided it's mature enough now that they're going to switch it on by default in 2022. It's basically what it does is it tracks query performance over time, it aggregates it, and shows you statistics over time based upon the parameters that you set for it. It also grabs execution plans and shows you queries if a query has multiple execution plans based upon different parameters or just based upon a recompile of statistics. Then you'll see that aggregated over time and see what's changed. The data in this, in Query Store specifically, is stored in your main data file. So it's within your database file. So you don't have to worry about an external log file. And if you move your server, if you back up and restore elsewhere, Query Store goes with you. So it's really good if you're going to copy it to a test environment, for example. Because it's in your MDF, it persists through restarts as well. So things like the DMVs, the dynamic management views, obviously TempDB, they all get reset when the server restarts. Query Store persists. So if you have a problem that crashes your server, you'll get up to a certain time limit based upon your data flush interval. You'll get that data stored, so you can analyze it afterwards. Okay, that's the basics of what it is. Should I turn it on? Yes, you should. We've seen very few instances where Query Store's being a problem, and you can be careful with settings that you enable. But ultimately, this feature is 9 years old now. It's gone through, what's that, 5 versions of SQL Server. So it's mature at this point, and it's something that we would recommend be enabled by default. Okay, so a couple of things, specific things you can do in Query Store and things you can't do. Query plan forcing. Now, we'll have a look at this in one of the demos later, but basically, for any given query, it gets given a query ID in Query Store. And for that, you can see if it has more than one query plan associated with it. Some queries will you only have one, some you might have dozens. I think the record I've seen is close to 100 different execution plans attached to one query, which is crazy. But what you can do is you can view each of those execution plans, so you can compare them, you can save them off and put them in any tool you like if you use Central Plan Explorer, for example. But you can also, if you decide that there's one plan or there's one plan that you like over all the rest of them, it always performs well, you can force it. And I'll show you that feature, but that basically says, SQL Server, I want you to use this query plan every time you execute this query. There are a couple of caveats. It's you making the request. There are a few times where it can make a decision not to, but I've had a customer recently where a statistics update caused a trigger to use a bad plan. We found it in Query Store and we forced it to use the plan that it used the previous day. So it's very useful. It's worth noting that query plan will be forced forever unless somebody goes and unforces it. And there is a way of viewing your list of currently forced plans. So that's it's something you'd want to review going forward. But that's a very nice feature, is the query plan forcing. It's worth noting that a lot of the automatic tuning features in Azure SQL DB take data out of the Query Store and utilize that. So for those of you not in Azure SQL DB, you can have automatic index creation and deletion, and then you can have there's other automatic features that is currently Azure only. Whether or not they're in 2025 on premises, we're not sure yet. But in Azure, that's where we roll out new features, where Microsoft roll out new features. And we've got some customers in Azure SQL DB, and they take full advantage of these. We've tested them, and they're reliable. So as an aside, I'd recommend we use those if we can. Some of the limitations prior to SQL Server 2022, it's not enabled by default. That's also the case if you upgrade to SQL Server 2022. It won't be enabled. You'll have to go manually enable it. The only way it's on by default is if you create a brand new database on a 2022 instance. Also, in availability groups, currently, because it's part of your MDF, that gets copied over as part of your AG. What that means is that your secondary is read-only. And because of that, Query Store can't capture data on your secondary at the moment. 2022 plus, they're bringing out the feature to enable it on readable secondaries. Oh, sorry, it's already out in 2022. But prior to that, it's not good. It doesn't work on secondaries, unfortunately. If you very likely have different queries running on these secondaries, read-only queries, but they don't get captured prior to 2022. So it's another reason to upgrade. Right, let's do a couple of demos to show exactly what Query Store is and how it works. Just for reference, this is a local SQL Server 2022 instance, Developer Edition, and this is Management Studio 21. This isn't production, and this version of Management Studio is still technically in preview. However, it's good for demos, and I like the way that it stores tabs down the side, which you'll see in a second. Where do we want to go? Documents, webinars. Here we go. Fantastic. Okay, let's go find those. Yep, definitely there. Okay, file. File, I must have clicked on folder. There we go, right. Let's go and look at Query Store. So just to briefly show you, and I mentioned it's a database level setting. So this is my server. If you go into your databases, you'll find a database, and Query Store will be there if it's enabled. If you have a database where Query Store is not enabled, I enable it everywhere. I'll turn it off to show you. Query Store, if you turn it off, then you will not have Query Store. Oh, you do have Query Store here in 2022. That's interesting. It's because I've had it on. But you need to enable it to enable this tab in the Query Store here. Now, let's just go through a few settings on when you enable Query Store. It has its own tab in options here. So you have three modes here. You have off, you have read only, and you have read write. Off means inaccessible, not capturing data. Read only means don't capture fresh data, but be available so that we can query the data that's already in the Query Store. Read write is normal, I'm capturing and you can read data from me. It's worth noting, sometimes, even if you want to be in read write, your actual operation mode may be different. There could be a few reasons for that. One of them may be that the Query Store is full and it will put itself to read only because it can't capture any more data. Let's go through a few more of the options. So data flush interval. This is how often Query Store sends data to disk and hardens it to the MDF. I've set it as 1 minute for this demo. Would usually have that around 15 minutes, I think it is by default, but it's just how often it saves to the disk. This statistics collection interval here, we'll have a look at some reports in a second, but Query Store will aggregate data over a certain time period. So it's the default is 1 hour, I believe. So we'll aggregate the average queries. It will count how many queries run in that hour, show you things like averages, max, min. So this is very much dependent on what you prefer. Again, for this demo, I'm setting it to 1 minute so that we've got we can capture the data. Query Store retention here. So how many plans you can capture per query maximum. So a thing that isn't unusual for us to see is when we're doing a health check is a query can have tens of thousands of associated query plans. You don't want all those captured in Query Store. It's unnecessary. It's going to put an unnecessary load on your server. So you can limit it to capturing 200 as the default. You can capture it, set it to whatever. If it needs to be high, if it needs to be lower, tailor it to your flavor. The maximum size of the Query Store. Now this is an interesting setting. So by default, it stores 1 gig's worth of data. And again, this is within your main data file in your database. You can see on my demo system here, it's currently using 2 meg of the 998 meg available to it. It will only use what it needs. As it grows, it will take up that much space in your main data file. If it needs to grow, it'll have to grow. That's just normal. And like I mentioned, if you've got a particularly large system, particularly busy system, you may hit the 1 gig limit. I think my record is hitting that limit in about 4 hours on one particularly busy client site. So you may need to adjust this maximum size. Another thing you can do to help the storage is you've got a few settings here. So Query Store capture mode. There's 3 options here. You can set it to none. So it's just not capturing data. Query data. You can set it to auto. Now, what this does is Query Store decides which queries are important based upon how many resources they're using. We've seen that if we've got queries that run small and often, they can be ignored in this capture mode. And if you're in a death by 1,000 cut situation, it might not pick them up. That's what auto does. All is literally everything. Bear in mind that's going to put a load on your system. If you're capturing all queries, it's going to have more of an overhead than if you're just capturing what Query Store decides are important. And you can set custom as well, but that's a setting I've never had to use. So we won't have to go into it in depth in this presentation. Okay, size-based cleanup mode. This is similar. You've got off or auto. It's saying when data reaches maximum size, do you want it to allow it to self purge data? So you probably have that to auto as standard. Stale query threshold. So the statistics that I mentioned where we capture the data, how long do we want to keep that data around for? Set to 30 days. If you've got extreme pressure on your storage, maybe take that down to 7 or 2 or whatever works in your environment. Wait stats capture mode here. So do you want to capture the wait statistics of queries? Do you want to know if they're block victims or what have you? It's a simple off-on capture. And again, if you're these are the sorts of things you'd only change if you're finding you've got quite a lot of overhead in your system. So those are the default settings. And as in any SQL Server, you can click script here and it will create a script of your changes. So this one, these are the changes I've just made to that. And you can see here, this is how you would enable Query Store via T-SQL, because you don't want to go into the GUI every time. So it's just turning Query Store on, and that will just set it default parameters. And then if you want to modify, you can change whatever parameters you need from here. So we try not to use the GUI because it doesn't scale. Right, let's do a couple of demos on how the Query Store captures. Where are we? Oh, in fact, we won't. I'll show you some stuff, but let's do that. Let's show you some data. Now, what I'm going to do, this database we're going to look at is an SSG internal database. We run some automation on here. It's just a background process, but it's got Query Store running. So it's a good way to show you how it's working. There we go. Right. So this is an Azure SQL DB server. It's called automation. It has Query Store running. So we'll show you some of the things we have in here. One of the first things you'd usually go here is top resource consuming queries. So you can see here, we're looking at top resource consumers by duration, total over the last hour. So I'm going to go to configuration and change that to look at the last week worth of data. Okay, so these columns here are different queries. This highlighted query here, you can see the T-SQL from down here. It's just selecting an alert ID from one of our tables. And over here, you can see the dates. And these are aggregations of our execution plans here. So if we hover over one of these, you can see this is for the period of the 17th to the 18th of April. So it's a 24-hour period. During that time, we had a query executed. This query was executed 66,000 times with an average duration of 1.3 milliseconds. And you can see if we go to a later one here, this is the 22nd to the 23rd of April, 77,000 execution and an average duration of 1.97 milliseconds. So this is what I mean when we're talking about the aggregation periods. So we can change by queries by total execution count, total CPU, and then you can change the aggregation from average to total, things like that. To use an example of a query with multiple plans, we've got one here. He says, okay. definitely had one yesterday. Bless it. Okay. So we can see all these queries have got one execution plan per query. Oh, here we go. So this query here, we can see this is the T-SQL. This is a query plan. For this query ID, we have two query plans here. We have 880681 and 880615. So if you click on them, you can see that they'll be slightly different. It'll be further down. And you can see the average duration of this query is 6.4 seconds. And this one here is averaging 4.6 seconds. So if we wanted to force this plan ID here, we literally highlight it and click on force plan here. It says, do you want to force the plan? And we go, yes. And then it will give us a tick box in that execution plan at the execution plan, the query plan. And then we know that's forced. So if you need to force a plan, that's how you do it. If you want to view what's forced, you click on this report here using the GUI. We can see we've got two query IDs here with forced plans. This one's actually a much better example. So you can see this query has got a number of query plans. If you click on them, you can view the separate plans if I give it a chance to load. And we can see here we've got a forced query plan, which is this grey one here. It's forced. If I wanted to unforce it, simply click this button. In fact, I will unforce this query before I forget. So we can unforce this plan. Do you want to unforce? Yes. Done. One of the other great features in Query Store in the canned reports here is the regressed queries. What this will do, it will show you queries that have gotten slower during your time period. So I'll extend this out. Oh, this is a week. So you can see this query that we saw earlier has gotten slower on average. It's almost doubled in duration from 1.03 milliseconds to 1.97 milliseconds. So that's not an issue. This is a related query. Yeah, you can see a query here. Go away. Now, what's interesting to see is this little triangle symbol means that this query failed. If you see a circle, it succeeded. If you see a square, it's cancelled by the user or the application, and a triangle, it failed. So we can see on here that this query has been consistently failing. I know from experience that's the nature of this query. It's designed to fail if it's got nothing to do. This query here, you can see the total duration has regressed over the past week. So if we're having performance issues, we could come here and have a look. Now, the canned queries are great, but they're not perfect. So there are a number of community tools that are used to read the DMVs, because Query Store stores everything in DMVs just like we do. So my favorite one for Query Store is SP Quickie Store. So this is by Eric Darling. You could just Google SP Quickie Store, and it's all on his GitHub. Basically, what we do here is we can execute this. It's already installed on the instance, and it will go and interrogate Query Store, and it will give us our top queries. It defaults to CPU consumers, I believe, or it might be duration. Looking at this, but it will give you your top queries based upon duration. There's a bunch of different parameters. You can do things like include a particular query plan. There's one here to search for query text. So if you know the query, but you don't know its query ID, or you know a bit of the T-SQL, you can put it in here and it will find it in Query Store for you if it's available. It's extremely powerful. If you're starting to use Query Store, I very much recommend digging into SP Quickie Store. And Eric's got on his website, he's got a bunch of videos on how to use this, and yeah, it's a great tool for Query Store. Okay, that's the Query Store we're going to go through for today, rather than spend an hour on it, which I easily could. Jason, are there any questions?
No questions at the moment, Rich. And by the way,
Perfect.
if you do have questions for all of our audience, please enter them in the Q&A and we'll get to them. Thanks.
Cool. You get to hear me talking too much if you don't ask questions. So on your head be it. Right. So that's Query Store. Let's talk about extended events. These are a slightly older feature, like it says on the screen there. It's an 08 feature. They've been around for a while. They're designed as replacements for SQL Tracer, SQL Profiler, which are technically deprecated, but people still use them. What they allow is it's effectively, you can think of it like a SQL trace. You put it on and it captures events. It runs in your extended events list, and we'll go and have a look at how they work. But it captures what you want it to capture, basically. They were designed as a replacement for Tracer Profiler because Tracer Profiler are quite resource intensive and they can put a decent load on a server when they're running. So Microsoft came up with extended events to try and be lighter touch. You still don't want a bunch of them running all the time, but they are they have less overhead than things like Profiler. And this is different to SQL Server. These store data externally from SQL Server. These store it in a log file. So you have to give it a file location and it stores externally because these are server level traces, not database. Okay, so some key concepts of what an extended event is. We're going to go and look at some T-SQL in a minute, but just so we understand these. So an event is something that happens within a SQL Server, like a deadlock or a login attempt. A session is the event itself that's running. The target is where you're storing the data. You don't have to store it in a data file. You can store it in the ring buffer, but your server gets restarted, you lose your extended event data because your ring buffer gets nuked. Your action can be, we'll go and have a look at that, but it's additional data that it captures when it runs. Predicate, where login name equals Rich Benner or whatever, predicates. An event class, we'll go through that, but that's an extended event specific setting. So, two ways to create an extended event. You can create them through the GUI. Now, if you're not comfortable with extended events, what they have available, what they can do, the GUI is a nice way to be able to go and look at it and go, oh, so this is everything I've got available to me. You can move columns in and out and things like that. Doesn't scale very well. Once you've got the extended event you need to create, you want to script it out, and then you've got the T-SQL. You can just turn it on, turn it off via code. We all love code with DBAs. So why extended event and not profiler? So profiler is something we see used, well, I see used more often than I'd like to. And what most people do is they're trying to find out what queries are running or what users execute a query right now. They'll turn on profiler, which captures everything. It puts quite a strain on the server when they're trying to troubleshoot because you've got a problem. You don't want to be, if you're in a problem situation, if you're fighting a fight, you don't want to be putting extra effort, extra workload on your server. So extended events is a great alternative to that. Plus, extended event, you're more focused. You could say, I only want to capture login events or capture executions of this particular query. And it only does those. And you can write those ahead of time. So you've got a little toolbar ready for you. Let's stop talking about it. Let's go and look at a demo again. So, we will. No, I don't want to open a folder again. I want to open a file. View. So let's go ahead and look at a blocking session. And just so you understand where they're stored, this is all going to take place on this server. So let's disconnect from here. In SQL Server Management Studio, in Management down here, you'll have an Extended Events tab. And you open it up. You didn't see that. That's a secret. You'll have an always on health, you'll have a system health. These are defaults. This will be where your extended events live in here. And if you wanted to view any data, you open it up and it shows you where the data's stored. We'll go through that. For this demo, what we want to do is capture blocking events. So we're imagining we've got a problem where we're having blocking, we don't know what, we don't know who. We want to capture them in an extended event. Now, some of the words we saw, session, event, action, target, with, so your predicates, or not your predicates, sorry, these are the additional settings. But we recognize all these. Basically what we're doing is we're looking for blocked process reports. We're going to capture this data. We're going to put it into this file here. And these are just the additional settings that you'll get when you script one out. This is going to be called capture blocking events. So if we run it, connect to the correct database, not the Azure database. We'll run it. It'll create the session for us. We refresh it. We can see our event is here. Now, this will, when your server restarts, it will start up on, but when it first kicks in, it will not. It's worth noting here that to capture blocking events, you have to set your block process threshold. We're going to set it to 5 seconds here. You just have to reconfigure that. Mine was already at 5, but that's the command to do that. And then you can just start it, which will start. We can refresh. We can see we're capturing blocking events now. Now, if I just look at the raw data here, you can see there's some blocked processes from earlier. But let's go make a fresh one. And what we're going to do is we're going to watch live data instead. Now, this will just show blocks that happen now. Let's go and make a block. So this is a couple of queries that do similar things. So I'm using the Stack Overflow database here. This is literally a copy of the database from stackoverflow.com. So we've got a users table. And what I'm going to do on this query is I'm going to update the table to set the display name equals the display name. But I'm not going to commit the transaction. So this is going to take a lock on the users table. What we're going to run then is we're then going to try and select the data from that table. This is going to be blocked. So let's do that. If we run our query, so we can see that's running. Run SQL is active. We can see the transactions here. It has a begin transaction and no commit, no rollback at the end. If we then try and run this, it's going to sit here. We go back to running SQL is active, which, by the way, SQL is active just shows actively running queries right now. We can see here that our process 157 here, which is our blocked query. If I make this a slightly bigger, you'll be able to see the process ID. 157 here is blocked by session 155, which is here. I'm going to commit that, and that will clear. Done. The block's clear. However, we go back to our live data. We can see that we've captured the blocking event a number of times because it's every 5 seconds. You can see that from the time here. And the data we've captured is we've got the block process report here. We've got things like the database ID, the database name, the fact that it's a lock. We know the session ID that it was captured for. We know that it's a shared lock this was waiting for. So yeah, and if we wanted to capture things like username of the victim, this is SA, but if we wanted to capture the actual session ID, we could change the query to include what we want. So this is an idea of what we capture in the extended event. But then what we've got here, it's not that nice to read all this data. So what we can do is we can read the output file via T-SQL. So this is my output file on disk. We're just using the file retarget file query. And you can see we've got the same data in a tabular format, but most of the data is in this event data tab here. So what we can do is I've made a view here, which basically makes this data slightly easier to read. So we've got the session ID, we've got blocked process report here, and then we can pass that out in a query and get much more useful information. Of course, hang on. Let's make that view. These scripts will all be available at the end of the webinar, by the way, so don't worry about reading exactly which queries are happening. So yeah, we can see that it was a Management Studio query run off my jump box by me that was doing the blocking. The blocking query was this update query, and the victim query was a select from users here. It was waiting for this long. We can see the exact blocked object if we want to use DBCC page or DBCC page. So we can see exactly what's blocked, what was blocking it, and then we can go and troubleshoot. So that's blocking. Let's take a quick look at a similar thing, but for deadlocks. So we've got deadlocks. Now, this is very similar. This is a deadlocks report. It's capturing the deadlock reports here. We do have to save a metadata file here just for reading the data. It makes it simpler. So what we'll do, we'll create this extended event. We already have our block process report set to 5, but that shouldn't matter. And we can turn the event on. Now, you can see we've got our deadlocks enabled and running. We'll view the output here. We can see we've got one deadlock from yesterday, 2 days ago. But let's go and make a new deadlock. I'm going to assume everybody knows what a deadlock is. Very briefly, if you don't, it's when two processes are both blocking each other and one of them gets executed by SQL Server. So this will make sense once I've got these two queries open. So what this query is going to do, it's going to update our users table. Exactly the same query as before. Once it's done that, it's going to then try and update the comments table to set for this, for one of the random comments here, it's just going to, so in fact, for all of my comments, that's my user ID, it's going to just update them. This query here is going to do the opposite. It's going to try and update comments, and then it's going to update the users table. So what we'll do, query 1 will begin a transaction that will take a lock on the users table here. Query 2, we're going to bring a transaction and it can take an update on the comments table. Now, they're both going to be sitting there quite happily with open transactions. As soon as they try and take a lock on each other's resources, we're going to see a deadlock. Now, they're both the same query, this one here. So this is our victim. So this process, 149, was deadlocked, and it's been chosen to be the deadlock victim. So this process was killed by SQL Server, and it's saying rerun the transaction. Cool. Okay. If we go and look at our deadlock data here, if we read the output, same as before, we can see we've got our additional deadlock captured. We will do the same. We'll create a view to make the data a bit more readable. And then the difference here being we've got a deadlock graph. Now, I love a deadlock graph, but they're not very easily readable in SQL Server. So let's save that off as, save it to desktop as deadlock graph 1. Sure. What I'm going to do, this is SQL Sentry Plan Explorer. If you don't have it, I would recommend it. It's a free tool. It's excellent at looking at execution plans and deadlocks, funnily enough. So we can see this is our deadlock graph here. And in here, we've got the key, the two tables we got a deadlock on. SPID 149 here in red, that was the victim. SPID 150 here, that was the aggressor. And we can see the users table and the comments table. And if we press play, we can actually see the way the locks were taken in order. So this happened first. I ran SPID 149. Second, I ran SPID 150, which took a lock on comments. And then on 150, I tried to take an update lock on users, but it had to wait for this process. And then on 149, I tried to take an update on comments. That's our deadlock. So that's what we can capture in extended events for deadlocks. A couple of other things that people use that I mentioned on before that they use extended events for. And let's be good and let's stop our sessions. And that's the thing, you can have these here and stopped. So if you need them, you can just enable them. You don't need to create them from scratch every time. So we've got not there, recent files. Must have saved those in a different place. Yeah. So we've got here. So I mentioned different things you can run. This will find logins for any users. So if we create here, the event is on SQL Server login. We're going to capture their enter username, the session ID, and where they're coming from. We're going to save it in a file here. Created, enabled. Then what we can see down here, see our track user logins. If we just want to watch the fresh data or watch the history data, we can see it's captured login events on this jump box for this database. And you can see down here it's captured a bunch of data. And then if we wanted to view live data, we can do that. And all we need to do is open a new query window, and it will have captured our login, the details, my enter username here, the fact I'm coming from Management Studio from this jump box, and my SPID. So you can see SPID 151 over here. So it's just capturing it. And the way it works is it'll refresh. So it'll capture, you can see we've got session ID 51. These are some background stuff probably. So yeah, we can capture that. One more useful thing we can capture is in here. If we were looking for a specific query, so that this is one of the big things that people use Profiler for, is we're trying to find a particular query. Now, this is on the batch completed, but you can add multiple events. So we're doing the RPC call completed as well. So in an extended event, you can have multiple events that are captured. What we're doing is we're looking for where SQL tests like update users. So that's what we've been doing. So if we run that, it'll be disabled. We can enable it, confirm it's there. And then if we go and view the data, we can see this is data captured before, but we can see that we've got this query captured by this user, this session ID, from this jump box via Management Studio, and here's the T-SQL, or the batch text, and here's the T-SQL itself. So it's very useful. If you're looking for who's running a particular query, for example, it's problematic, you don't know where it's coming from, you can run this, and it will just log to a table or log to a file, and you can read it later. So yeah, it's very powerful. It's got a lot of different features. Just to give you an idea of what it looks like when you try and create a session. Come on. If you use the wizard, call it something sensible like that. You've got a bunch of things here. So you can choose, if bad memory, like just going through here, there's lots of options. I'm going to pick one, column store, created a segment. I pull that over as an event. And then you can just go through, and then what fields do I want? I want to know the database ID. I want to know the client host name, and whatever. You pick some plan handle. I don't want to filter. I'm just going to create that, and it will create it. You can start it. You can watch the live data, and it will open up here. You can see the extended events created. If you want to be able to use this, you can script it to a new window, and it will create your code for it, your T-SQL, to create your extended event. Very useful, very powerful, if you know it exists. Again, I'm going to disable all these because otherwise I will forget. Okay, Any questions up to this point, Jason? Or as I've been
No,
talking
sir.
non-stop. Okay,
No
cool.
questions, or we could say no queries if we want to be clever about it.
Yeah, should we search the query stuff for them? Okay. Yeah, I mean that's today's discussion and kind of the introduction on what these two features are, what you can do with them. We do have a couple of webinars for further deep dives. We've got some query store and some extended event sessions if you wanted to go and watch those. They are very good. I highly recommend them. I think we've answered the question. I don't think we've got any more questions. I think I've just talked 15 minutes too fast today.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I think we're good. Again, if there's any questions after this, our email address is on the website. You can contact us. We're happy to help. If you want to comment on this webinar on the website itself, I'll reply there if there are any questions. And we'll make all these scripts and these slides available.
Yes, exactly. We will probably get the email out. Well, not probably. We will get the email out Thursday or Friday with the presentation and Rich's scripts. And a different topic, we are figuring out our next webinar, the timing and the topic. And as always, we'll let you know about that as soon as we pin that down. And then open registration and let you enjoy that. We always take July and August off, as you may remember. So we're trying to figure out if the next one is going to be in June or not until September, but one is coming in the near future. So
you never know. It might be SQL Server 2025 if they release that. We'll see.
At some point, we will definitely cover that. Yes, no question. We did that, well, a couple years ago, obviously, for 2022. And yes, on the radar for when we can tackle that one.
Absolutely.
So I guess we'll give you back 10 or 12 minutes of your afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Rich, thank you for your insights and demos and all the great content. And it's late for him in England. Well, not horrible, but
it's still light outside.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's
not bad. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and until next time.
Thank you.